we're a really small church. Speakers, so I was originally scheduled to present this, I think, back in October. And somebody showed up who could only speak that Sabbath. So yeah, take it. And it happened again last month. So this was never designed to be a Christmas sermon, but hopefully you won't mind. I think since I'm going to draw, I'm going to shift gears and set up down here just for a minute. Make sure this is
Cleaning up my hot there. Good. Could you get the... Put a little less angle on that. Okay. Today, I'm going to talk a little bit about decision making as a Christian. Because, as Christians, we're faced on a daily basis with all kinds of decisions, right? And the need to determine and discern if it's God, what we decide is God's will for us. It might be a relationship decision, a decision whether to move to somewhere new. You guys have been going through that, getting a job, health treatment, all different things. And as Christians, we naturally look to Scripture, don't we, to find guidance in making our decisions. I'm going to move up here a little more. And as Seventh-day Adventist Christians, probably we also take some time to look at what the Spirit Prophecy has to say about something we make a decision. Quite a few years ago, it was probably, what's 1990? Already 40 years? 30 years. Anyway, I was introduced to a concept by a guy named Alden Thompson. I don't know, he's from your neck of the woods, right? I think he lives down the road from your dad. But anyway, he introduced me to the idea that there's a priority of importance in the counsel of Scripture. That some Scripture takes priority over others in the decision-making process. And at the time, I kind of filed it in the back of my mind somewhere as an interesting biblical concept that I never really thought about much. And in recent years, God's really been impressing me more and more to focus my study on justification by faith and Christ our righteousness. And as I've been doing that more, I realized that God has been putting this concept that He shared with me 30 years ago into my experience without me even thinking about it. So I'd like to share with you this morning some things about this principle that have been really super helpful in my day-to-day walk with God. Most of us here today would probably agree that when we're faced with a moral decision in our life, that we should first get our advice from Scripture, our guidance from Scripture. But is all the counsel of Scripture of equal importance when it comes to making a decision? I'm going to put up a text here if this thing will work. I'm not talking about whether all the laws in Scripture or all Scriptures are inspired or not, but the relative importance of the different ones. Diane has agreed to graciously be our reader this morning, so I'm going to have her read this, and you can follow along on the screen.
Matthew 22, verses 36 to 40.
Oh, I'm sorry, I got the wrong side up there. What happened here? They didn't get reversed, did they? Anyway, it was our memory verse. Maybe we could just read it out as quickly. You see a Matthew 23, 23 there?
Yes, I do.
Can you put that up for me? Yeah, there we go.
Matthew 23, 23 says, "Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! For you tithe mint and dill and cumin, and have neglected the weightier provisions of the law, justice and mercy, and faithfulness. But these are the things you should have done without neglecting the others.
Okay, so what do you think Jesus meant by weightier provisions of the law? Yeah. Okay.
Being more to God.
Okay. Something that was more important and a priority. You know, first things first. Yeah. Where did you get that idea?
Those things that are closer to the core of who God is. What is the essence of the kingdom of heaven? What is at the heart and the very heartbeat of heaven? Those things versus more the fringes that help guide the standards that keep us in line, but yet there's a core.
Could you come up and give this? That's exactly the point. I could stop right here. Yeah, thank you. That's it, isn't it? The things that really matter. You know, the essence of God's character. By the way, I think when we think of the term law, we can also include in this any imperative statement in Scripture, you know, like anything Scripture says to do or to be right or admonishes us to do. In a sense, those are all laws. So with this in mind, I'd like to share this morning what I learned from this man that I think is really, really helpful. This pyramid, we're going to say that everything at the top of this pyramid, these are the laws that are most important. And down here at the bottom would be the ones that are least important. Okay, so as a good Seventh-day Adventist Christian, what would you say is the law that's the most important? That's exactly what I wanted to hear. That's what a good Adventist answer, but unfortunately it's not the right answer.
What was the answer?
Oh, the Ten Commandments.
Oh.
I'm not picking on you, so because I used to think exactly the same way. But let's let Jesus answer the question himself. Can we put up the Matthew 22? Let me see if I can get it. Yeah, here you go.
Matthew 22, verses 36 to 40. Teacher, which is the great commandment in the law? And he said to them, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul, I believe that should say, and with all your mind. This is the great and foremost commandment. And the second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. On these two commandments depend the whole law and the prophets.
You know, I used to not think of that as a law. I thought of it as, you know, a nice helpful comment, but the law is really the Ten Commandments. But Jesus said this is the foremost law. So I'm going to put that up here. Love for God and love for others. Pardon my handwriting. Okay, what would you say is the next most important law? You're not happy, you're not going to let me catch you twice.
What I'm thinking is that that's the antithesis of the Ten Commandments. So
Yeah.
Well,
Well, and that's interesting because I forgot to emphasize that point. Thank you, because it says all the laws depend on that law. And King James says hangs. You know, you can almost see like that's the nail that everything's hanging on.
There should be no other gods before me.
Okay, and so I'm going to put 10 Commandments here. Okay. Do you mind closing that? I think the wind's might make that noise. What would you say? Well, let me just address it myself. The next box, I'm going to put in all the other laws and imperatives in the Bible. Should I put that? Thank you. So this would include all the rest of Scripture. And then probably, as Seventh-day Adventists, we probably put the spirit of prophecy there, right? Because you know how she said her writings were a lesser light, the Bible was a greater light, so I'm going to just go ahead and write it in the box here. And then lastly, I'd like to put something down here that I call traditional religious practices. You know, this is like how we structure our worship service, how we dress for church, what we do or don't do on Sabbath that isn't specifically addressed in Scripture. You know, traditional religious practice. How should I do that? Let's draw it in here. Okay. And before we finish with this diagram, I'd like just to add one more thing. You know, some of the laws in the Bible are absolute, aren't they? You know, absolute meaning they apply to every person, everywhere, at all times. Probably this law, the Ten Commandments, apply to everybody. And other things that aren't part of that, like Paul's admonition in Galatians against practicing the deeds of the flesh, you know, those are absolute laws that apply to everyone at all times. And some laws in the Bible are conditional, aren't they? Like the laws of priesthood or laws of animal sacrifice. What would be a New Testament one? Maybe Paul's admonition that a woman should pray without her head covered. You know, we don't all follow that. They're conditional. So where in this diagram would you put the line between absolute and conditional? These are absolute, right? Some of these are conditional and some are absolute. So maybe somewhere in the middle here. So I'm going to put this as absolute. Because what we're trying to do here is just make a diagram of, you know, to help our minds see what's really important and what's of lesser importance. I'm just going to abbreviate conditional, if you can remember that. And the guy that first introduced me to this idea, he called this the 2, the 10, and the mini, which is a really, really helpful way to remember that, you know, the 2, the 10, and the mini. Okay, so now that we've kind of established this diagram, I'm going to come to the part of my talk that's actually the only important thing that I have to say today, or the most important thing. And that's this. When it comes time to make a decision in our life, or even to think of the direction our actions and mind are going, we always should start up here and not down here. You know, and you think of how many times we don't do that, you know, and what happens often. But this is first importance, this is lesser importance. I want to give 2 examples of this. One is from Scripture, and one is from an experience we had when we worked in Thailand. But before that, I wanted to throw in something else. You know, I actually gave this talk at a church in Maine this summer, and after I did that, I realized that, and you kind of hit on this, that this concept doesn't just apply to decision making. You know, this is actually a concept that we need to apply to the whole focus of our Christian life. You know, everything we think of and do as Christians should focus starting here. Remember, it said, do this without neglecting the other. It doesn't mean we're belittling anything else, but it means that you've got to put first things first. Let me give you just one example of this in a practical sense. You know, I used to read, you know how Psalm 119 is all about the law. Verse 97 of Psalm 119 says, oh, how I love your law. It's my meditation all the day long. So I remember when I was first became a Christian almost 50 years ago, I thought, I'm going to spend the whole day thinking about the 10 Commandments and different behavioral rules, you know. And, you know, I tried that, and it had some benefit, but it actually seemed kind of dry, and it didn't seem to always apply to what was happening in my life. You know, there was something kind of mechanical or dry about it. But think of it this way, how I love your law. It's my meditation all the day long. Think of it in this context. You're spending your whole day thinking about God's love for you, the tremendous love for you, and how you respond. You know, it says we love because He first loved us. And you're spending your whole day thinking about the needs of others. You know, that's really different outcome. And so what I'm saying today doesn't just apply to decision making, although that was sort of the context of my talk version. Okay, to the examples. The first one is from the Bible. I'll let Diane read there.
Mark 3, verse 1 through 6. He entered into the synagogue, and a man was there whose hand was withered. And they were watching him to see if he would heal on the Sabbath, so that they might accuse him. And he said to the man with the withered hand, "Get up and come forward." And he said to them, "Is it lawful to do good or to do harm on the Sabbath, to save a life or to kill?" But they kept silent. And after looking around them with anger, grieved at their hardness of heart, he said to the man, "Stretch out your hand." And he stretched it out, and his hand was restored. The Pharisees went out and immediately began conspiring with the Herodians against him as to how they might destroy him.
Okay, how would it affect your life if one of your hands didn't work? You know, in our society, in bad shape, our society, we had a teacher just before your dad guys came who actually lost the whole arm in a hay baler, in an gnarly accident in a hay baler. And he functioned pretty well, but in Bible times, this guy was facing two things. Most people made their living from manual labor. And also, he was facing the prevailing religious sentiment at that time that if you had a disability like that, you know, there must be something you're doing bad for God to do that to you, or at least your parents. And so he faced this double stigma. And Jesus went into the synagogue that Sabbath, and he saw this man, and he felt compassion for him, it says. And he wanted to help him and change his life. And yet others there that morning, they were only concerned about, is this guy going to break the rules that we've decided constitute proper Sabbath keeping? What part of the pyramid was Jesus starting from? Yeah, he loved for God. God would be glorified by healing this man, and he felt sorry for the man's hardship. This is a once-in-a-lifetime chance to change this guy's life. And where on the pyramid were the others that day starting from? Yeah, they were really concerned that he was not keeping the traditional religious rules that you don't heal on Sabbath. Where's that, Jimmy? You know the Bible pretty well. It's not in the Bible, right?
It's the fourth commandment.
Well, but it doesn't say not to heal.
Either Jesus was breaking the Sabbath or he wasn't.
So, anyway, what was the result of them starting down here? There's two important questions I want us to think of today. What's the result of starting here, and why we tend to do this? And we're just going to do the what for now. So what's the result what's the result for them of starting down here and not up here? What does it say? You can find it in verse 5. Okay, but I mean for them. What did it lead for them to have? It's a hardness of heart. You know, what's hardness of heart? It's lack of concern at all for other people. You know, here they are, when you do this, sometimes you actually look more dedicated and religious, right? Because, you know, those Pharisees, they had everything down, and, you know, guys like us they called us sinners if you weren't as religious as they were. But the result is hardness of heart, lack of concern for others, you know, which is so foreign to God's character, isn't it? Okay. By the way, what makes God angry? Is it setting aside traditional religious practices, or is it hardness of heart? Yeah, so Jesus is angry. Look at the text. I kind of wondered, what does that mean? It says, is it lawful to do good or to do harm? To save a life or to kill? Was he actually saying this indifference to somebody was analogous to killing? You know, he may have been referring to them wanting to kill him too, but that kind of disregard for the needs of people. You know, we don't often think that, do we? You know, we're thinking we have to mind our personal character for perfection, you know, which has its place. But if you're doing that, we're indifferent to the needs of others. You know, we're going to end up in the hardness of heart category. Okay, another example from our experience when we worked in Thailand for 7 years, not too long ago. But when we were there, we ran into a lot of individuals who, everybody wanted to come to Thailand to do mission work, you know, including us, because it's a nice place to go. And there was a particular group near the orphanage we worked at that had a really nice video recording studio, and they hired a young Thai man named Gop. Everybody in Thailand, if you've ever been there, has a 1 or 2 syllable nickname. That's Gop, is what we called him. And he worked for them doing video production, and him and his wife, Frame, and their young son were a member of our church in Chiang Mai. And we got to know them really well because they spoke English really well, and even though we tried hard, we never got much higher than this in our time. And so we would go out and eat with them or visit with them. And she told us this story one time. She had decided on a certain day to make a special lunch for the whole group at the studio and bring it as supplies to them. So she worked hard all morning, prepared that, and she brought the lunch to the studio. And when she walked in, the leader of the group, instead of expressing thankfulness for her kindness, openly rebuked her for wearing pants and not a skirt. Because this particular group was really conservative, and they thought that God, you know, the Bible has an admonition for women not to wear men's clothes. And by the way, I said this last time too, but I learned early in our marriage, one time our jeans got switched in the laundry, and her jeans got in my drawer. And when I tried to put them on, I quickly learned that women's pants are men's clothes. So anyway, that's neither here nor there. But anyway, she was very, very offended by this, because not only did it seem like he didn't care about her thoughtfulness, but Pastor talked a little bit about this last Sabbath, that Thailand is a shame culture, they call it. Like, you never openly rebuke somebody in front of everyone. You tell them on the side, you know, it's really considered shameful to lose face in front of everyone. But she was really hurt by this experience. So where do you think, I mean, this is probably no need to ask, but where do you think on this spectrum that guy was coming from? Okay. So maybe the more important question, of course, than that is, why did he or the Pharisees or anyone else start down here and not up here? Anybody want to take a shot at that? Self-righteousness. Yeah.
I have a daughter, she challenged me, she said, I keep Jesus' Ten Commandments. I don't keep God's commandments. See, and more important, Jesus' commandments to love. So she's telling me, I'm starting at number 2.
I'm going to address that in just a bit. Okay? But again, what do you think makes people start down here? You know, I'm giving the sermon, right, so I better have an answer.
It's easier to do that. It's easier to start at the bottom where you have specific rules and idea of what you're supposed to do and what you're not supposed to do. Whereas if you start at the top, that word love is so wide and so all-compressing that you lose sight of what you're trying to do.
You could. I'm going to address those two comments.
I think it's easier for people to do outward appearance than it is for them to work on the inside. So it's easier for people to give a perception of what they're trying to do instead of really internalizing what it is that they're supposed to be doing from the outside. Because if you see at the end of verse 4, it says they kept silent when he asked them the question. And they knew the answer. You know, they really didn't know, but they couldn't verbalize it and really give the right answer because they knew everybody else was going to be looking at it. So it intimidated them on really knowing what the answer is, but outwardly saying.
Yeah, very good. Thank you. Yes.
It's because they did not truly have the love of God in their hearts, and they didn't live by it.
And that gets to the root of it. How do we have the love of God in our hearts? I'll give you my answer, which is only one of many probably, but I really believe that focusing primarily on things at the bottom here is a direct result of having some form of an old covenant relationship with God. We've been studying that. Some of you visitors may not be that familiar with those terms always, but we've been studying a lot about the Old and New Covenant. The terms of the Old Covenant were, if you keep my commandments and do my statutes, then you'll be my people. Ellen White in the book Patriarchs and Prophets, in her chapter on the covenants, the law and the covenants, said that the terms of the Old Covenant were obey and live. So if you think that your spiritual standing with God is dependent on what you do, primarily on what you do and how well you do it, you're naturally going to be obsessed with the things you're supposed to be doing. It's just, you naturally invert the pyramid without even trying. It just happens because your focus is on what you're doing to earn salvation. Did you have that? And conversely, in a new covenant relationship with God, when we see His great love for us and the free gift of salvation that's offered as a gift, and we experience and accept that, we're going to be, how the Bible says we love because He first loved us. When we experience that love, we're naturally going to love God back. So to me, having the right relationship with God is either going to put you here or here. And of course, there's all sorts of variations in between. But if you find yourself stumbling in this area a lot, maybe think about that that's one of the main reasons. And by the way, this man later, his wife left him. So you could see the fruit of that attitude wasn't really helpful for him either. And this is going back to address what you said, one caveat, one warning. If we try to apply the law, primarily this part in our lives, outside of a committed relationship to the Lord, with the Lord, outside of a surrender of our heart to God, it's not going to work. We will probably just end up doing whatever we want, and saying it's that's because I love God and love people. There's a text that I'm going to close with this that addresses this in Romans. Very simple text.
Romans 8:7. Because the mind set on the flesh is hostile toward God. It does not subject itself to the law of God, for it is not even able to do so.
In Paul's writings, the flesh is another word for self. If our own thoughts and views and opinions is the final authority in our life, then it says we're not even able to subject ourselves to the law of God. So this only can come from, that's the answer to your, I just love everybody and do whatever I want. If you're surrendered to God, that doesn't happen. It just can't happen. So, but in a new covenant relationship with God, where we're just overwhelmed by His love for us, we're going to respond in a way of loving God back and loving others. And the new covenant promises says He'll put His law in our mind and write it in our heart. And it's been my experience, anytime I let God do that He always does it in this way, that putting love for God and putting love for others first.
Before you go to bed tonight, Try this 5-second ritual to finally end your nighttime peeing for good.
Catching him doing something illegal. They started out with something illegal, putting a guy with a withered hand in the synagogue, totally against the law.
Well, I guess so, but Jesus did say, though, even if your animal falls in the ditch on the Sabbath, you pull him out. So I'm not sure that I would agree necessarily that healing on the Sabbath was wrong. How could they have a law? Because nobody could do it. Nobody could do it until Jesus came.
They went against the law by putting a guy with a withered hand.
Oh, he shouldn't have been in the synagogue?
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
Because their mind was set on catching him doing wrong. They did wrong to start with.
Oh. Okay. So anyway, that's I think I'm going to be closer. I see the time is up, but thank you for your input. If no other comments, our closing hymn will be number 125, Joy to the Lord. This is kind of in the way. Let me put it to the side.
Let's stand, please. Joy to the world.
We just want to thank you for your presence with us this morning. We pray, Father, that we've seen from your word today could be a part of our life in the week ahead, that we would have love for you day by day, Lord, and concern for those around us. And we thank you for your promise to put these things in our mind and write them in our hearts, and claim that promise now and look forward to you fulfilling it. In Christ's name we pray. Amen.